All right, everybody, for those wondering why I didn't do any candid conversations this week, it was too dark, but we're having the time change, and so once the time change happens, I'll be back to those candid conversations. But anyway, about, probably 8 years ago, maybe 9, I recorded a video on heresy being taught at the church at Brook Hills, which is a mega church of a few thousand people in Birmingham, Alabama. And now we're going to give an update. It's very interesting here. They've sent out this email and it says, "We'd love for you to join us for our next prayer gathering on Sunday, November 8th. The prayer gathering will be unlike any of our others. Beginning at 4 p.m., we'll open all of our new campus for our faith family to be able to tour on your own. Some of our staff will be available to help guide you and answer questions. Then at 5:30 p.m. we'll all gather in the worship center to begin our time of prayer together, but we won't stay there. We'll quickly break up into groups and then spend time walking through specific areas of our new campus to pray for God's blessing on all the ministry that will occur in the space." So they've got this new campus, new buildings here. Now they've been asking, they've had this building fund going for a few years now, I believe, and trying to raise money for the new worship center. Oh, we're going to have this great new building. And they've got a picture of it here. I guess it is. It says prayer gathering for our new campus. And you probably can't see it too good because I had to print in black and white. But to me, it looks like you've got a lot of marble, marble floors. You know, it looks like a real fancy type of place. It doesn't look like it was cheap to build. That's my point, is it looks real fancy. Now, I find that interesting because I realized they'd been gathering money for a couple years, but the last 7 months or 8 months, we've had the COVID crisis going on in America. They have had their, for I guess at least 4 or 5 months there, they didn't allow anybody in the sanctuary. They had online studies on Sunday mornings, and you could give online, but very few people were attending these online studies. You know, we're talking about a church that usually has a few thousand people in attendance, and they go down to less than 100, sometimes less than 10 people watching the Sunday morning broadcast. They had so few people that they stopped putting the numbers on there because they didn't want you to know how few people were watching online. And then they started a couple months ago allowing people to get in there for a regular service, but you got to practice social distancing. It was only maybe 25% capacity. You have to wear face masks. And so now I didn't go, but I assume there are a lot fewer people there in person than normal. So all their offerings then, since March, since COVID, should have gone down tremendously, but yet they were able to build these new buildings on the campus, and it looks like they've got marble flooring and very fancy building there.
And glass for, instead of what am I thinking, sheetrock, they use glass to partition areas off. That's not cheap.
So the question is, where do they get all this money? I mean, most churches, I've seen a couple small churches, they gone bankrupt. They had to shut the door because if most small churches struggle. Where do you get the money to keep the church alive? And if you have to close the church for 4 or 5 months due to COVID, and then when you open it up, you still don't have that many people coming, your offerings go way down, but yet they're able to build this new building. You know, I mentioned in my conference that I did, and I mentioned about the Illuminati and the coronavirus. I said that these mega churches are going to be, they're aligned with the Illuminati, and they are going to be pushing more New Age philosophy and a one world religion when they come back. Again, I haven't watched what Brook Hills did, but in order for them, my point is, in order for them to get all this money to build this fancy building, even though they haven't had people in attendance, or very few people watching online or very few people in attendance, it shows where are they getting this money. They've been getting it from somewhere. What was this?
Oh, I was just looking at it.
Oh, okay. And you can see the on-campus worship gatherings. Save your seat. Well, look at what they're doing. They got their hands raised. It's a dark environment. You know, it looks more like a seance than it does worshiping God there. That's their picture. But here's another interesting point, and it's in the same email that they sent out. This is the Brook Hills United Appeal Fund. And I'll read that to you. It says, the Brook Hills United Appeal Fund has been established to support families in need this holiday season. Our United Appeal Fund also helps us maintain our tax-exempt status. We will be collecting an offering this Sunday, November 1st, at the end of each of our worship gatherings for this fund. Large baskets will be available near the exits for you to give. Well, yeah, they need large baskets because they're going to get a lot of money. If you're unable to attend on campus and would like to give, you may send a check to the church office. So, note there that second sentence says, our United Appeal Fund also helps maintain our tax-exempt status. I've never heard a church mention that, maintaining our tax-exempt status. And what's significant about that, if you know the IRS regulations for a 501c3, which is a nonprofit religious organization, is they are required, in order to get tax-exempt status, meaning they don't pay taxes, and if you make donations to them, then you can claim it on your income tax as a charitable donation. The reason the IRS allows that, supposedly the reason, is because charitable organizations serve a public purpose to the community. And so if the organization just gets a whole bunch of money coming in, but they don't do anything with it, then they're not distributing the money out to help the community, then they could lose their tax-exempt status. The IRS regulations require that 5%, at least 5% of the assets of a nonprofit organization must be distributed to help the community every single year. At least 5% per year. Now that's assets, that's not revenue. I'm an accountant, so I'll tell you the difference between assets and revenue. Assets is what you own. Revenue is the money you come in. So for a person, for example, if you own a house, that house is an asset. But that doesn't mean, so if your house is worth $300,000, that doesn't mean you got $300,000 coming in. That means you own an asset. It's a material possession that you have that's worth $300,000. Your revenue would be the money you make at your job. So you could have a $300,000 house, but then you make $50,000 a year. That's your revenue. So if I have to distribute 5% of my assets every year to help out the public, which is what a 501c3 is required to do, and my assets is $300,000 for a house, 5% of that is $15,000. So I would have to distribute $15,000 to help out the community every single year in order to maintain my tax-exempt status, even though I only get $50,000 a year in. So, what's interesting, and the reason I bring that up, is because of what we saw on the first page of our email, that they got this new campus. They got this big, fancy building. Well, that's an asset. Now, I don't know how much. I know before they were getting approximately $7 or $8 million a year in offerings that were given to the church at Brook Hills, and that was 8 years ago. Now it's probably at least 10 million, let's say. So if they get 10 million a year, well, they have to it's not based upon that. That's their revenue. That's the money coming in. They have to distribute at least 5% of their assets every year, or else they could lose their tax-exempt status, supposedly. So if they have a brand new building with marble and glass, I don't know how much this building's worth. It's probably worth a whole lot of money. So now they've got to distribute 5% a year. So let's say all of their assets come to $200 million. That's probably a reasonable thing to conclude. Well, if you have $200 million, 5% of that is $10 million. So they have to distribute $10 million a year, even though now if their offerings are only $10 million a year, that's starting to create a problem. So now they've got to distribute $10 million a year because their assets are $200 million. And so that's why they mention that. See, most churches don't have, if you're a small church, you may not even own the building you're in. You rent it. Or if you do own it, it's probably not worth a whole lot. A lot of these small churches, the buildings are falling down. They need new roofs. They've got water problems, mold problems, and they just don't have the money to fix it. So then the value of that building has gone way down. But if you are part of the Illuminati and you are getting a lot of people coming in and you're able to build a brand new fancy building with marble and glass when other people are not contributing funds, because where are you getting the funds is the question. Is this some kind of inside deal here, where the person gives money to the church and then in exchange they somehow win the bid to construct the building? I don't know if that's what happened, but it's not unreasonable to think that could happen. I'm sure that there are people in a 3,000 member church that are high in the organization that probably own, engineering, architect, building construction companies in the area. It's probably reasonable to assume, and why not give it to them? So that's why I don't think it's a coincidence that you've got this brand new building. So now their assets have gone way up, and now it shows. Now they're saying the fact that they say there's a Brook Hills United Appeal Fund, and that it's been established to support families in need this holiday season. Our United Appeal Fund also helps us maintain our tax-exempt status. All right. So they need, almost done, 5% of their assets have to be distributed. So now they've got so many assets that they got to worry about creating a fund just to maintain their tax-exempt status.
I guarantee you this fund has millions of dollars in it. And the thing is, they are not even going to give that money to people that are in need. Basically, what they're going to do is, because if you truly gave the money to the people that were in need, some of the people that are sleeping under the overpass, you could rent them an apartment, get them back on their feet, and get them a job where they, if they wanted to. Majority of them don't want to, but anyway, you see my point. But the thing is, on this fund, what they're going to do is they say they have to distribute a portion of that money. Well, if you got to distribute a portion of that money, all you do is, you got a friend that has a business, you write a check to them, and in return, they just put that money in the offering plate. So basically, you never lose your money. It just circled back around. And I'll give you a case in point so you know what I'm talking about. I actually worked with a company. This was when we were in California at the time. I worked for a company, and I basically would just answer phones and scan their documents because they tried to do paperless. Well, I noticed on some of the paperwork there was somebody with the same last name as the owner of the company. Now, this was a small company. And I asked, I said, is this person related? And one of the ladies in the office said, oh, that's his brother. Well, she actually, which I was surprised she told me this, but she said he rents this building from his brother. And then she gave me a little more information. Basically, what happens is, if you want to not have to pay taxes or give your money away or keep your money, basically, keep your money. If you say you donate your money to charitable organizations, I think now, you have to, donate a ton of money, over $100,000 or $10,000 to get a tax write-off or something like that.
Well, you can get a tax write-off for anything, but the standard deduction's gone way up now. So if you're not giving if you don't have at least like $12,000 in deductions on your taxes, then the charitable donations won't be deducted off of your income tax.
Okay, so in other words, the man that I worked for, his company, his brother owned the building. He rented the building from his brother. So he writes his brother a check for rent. His brother, in turn, takes the money and donates it to a organization. I don't know if it was considered a fund, organization, a charitable thing. Anyway, and that money went into another I'll just say fund, another fund, and that was basically where he could turn around and write a check back to himself. In other words, it's a full circle, and they don't have to pay taxes on it. His brother in order to pay his taxes, I guess he got a big discount for renting his building out. I don't know. But either way, the guy I worked for gave his brother money. His brother put the money in some kind of fund that in return, he could write a check back to himself and get his money back. And somehow it's all tax-free. I'm not explaining it right, but that gives you an idea of how rich people do it. And this person, it wasn't a small business as in they didn't have, money. They're starting out. They own several businesses, and this was one of them. So that's what makes me think that the church is going to do. They're not going to give it to people. They're not going to go out and stand in Walmart like some news crew waiting to pay their grocery bill and just pay it. They're not going to do that and just pay, people's bills. They're not going to stand in line at a restaurant and just say, all right, everybody behind me, I'm paying their bill. They're not doing that. They're not giving their money away. That money comes back to them. It's a circle. It comes back to them. They'll write a check to a company that says, we feed people under overpasses. Well, it's a non-profit. Maybe, I don't know how they will get the money back. But anyway, they know the person, maybe that person that owns that company goes to the church. Well, what they do is they write a check to show that they got rid of the money to this organization. That organization doesn't have to pay taxes, non-profit, whatever you want to call it. They, in return, write that check as an offering to the church, so the church gets the money back. Does that make sense?
There you go.
Alrighty.
Yeah, if I have, let's say this building cost, one construction contract was given to a member in the church there who owns the construction company, and it's a $10 million contract, let's say. So they can give a $10 million contract to this person, and then the person, of course, the money came into the church as tax-free. So now they've used that money. The church has used the money, so they can account for that, so they can still be a nonprofit, because this is an expense that we created, this $10 million expense for this church building. Then you take the $10 million, you give it to your friend who owns the construction company. He can then use all that money and let's say you have tithing, usually it's what they call 10%. So then he'll say, oh, well, I'll give $1 million back to the church here, tithe the thing. So then they'll say $1 million back. So now that can be declared as a charitable donation by the organization, which makes that construction company look real good that they give all this money, and they can advertise how they're real giving. So they give all this money to charitable organizations, so that makes them look good. And they could say out of $10 million, they pay all the expenses, the salaries of everybody and everything, and then they end up with, say, a $2 million profit because they gave them more money for that construction contract than what it was worth. They gave them an extra profit. So then they give them a $10 million contract instead of an $8 million. They make $2 million in profit. They give $1 million back to the church. So that's, the circle. You could just increase the amount of the contract by the amount that you want to give the charitable organization. So you were going to make a $9 million contract, but you make it $10 million. So you give them an extra $1 million. Then that construction company gives $1 million back to the church. So now that's a charitable donation by the construction company, so they don't have to pay taxes on that. So now the church gets the $1 million back to be used for something else. At the same time, because you gave an extra profit, well, now out of that $1 million left of profit, that they only have to pay taxes. That construction company only pays taxes on the $1 million. Well, they could just give the $1 million as salary or a bonus to the CEO if they want to, the guy who owns the company. So now there is no profit. And so the business itself doesn't have to pay taxes. Now the CEO will have to pay taxes on the $1 million that he got individually, but that's the only taxes that it's paid. So basically, you could just increase the cost of the construction contract that you're giving to your friend, and then they can in turn give back a charitable donation to the church there, and so then they don't pay taxes on that. So it's like the church, by giving out this $10 million contract and padding in an extra $1 million, and then having that construction company owned by one of the high people in the church give back $1 million to the church. Well, now they just got the $1 million back. So it's all this whole circle thing there, and because it's a tax-exempt organization, they can get away with this stuff. It's like a legal money laundering scheme, really. But you can't do that if it's not a nonprofit, because everybody somewhere down the line, people are paying taxes. But if you've got a nonprofit involved, you can get them part of a money laundering scheme, which is why you've got people like a Warren Buffett or Bill Gates or people that have got billions of dollars, and they create these nonprofit foundations. Well, they're not doing it to help you out. It's because they can launder money that way. There you go. Thanks for watching.